We are back with some more college football 25 news, as earlier today we had the Dynasty deep dive video and blog post get posted. Now, we've talked a lot, essentially summarizing a lot of their blog posts. We're not touching on that today. We are touching on the trailer, as really the deep dive was primarily visual representation of the news we have already got. Not a whole lot of new, a little bit sprinkled in, but really it's all about the visuals. So we will just stick to screenshots from that video. However, I suggest you go read if you like reading, because it is a long blog post, the full deep dive on Dynasty. I'll have that link down in the description below. But let's jump in to first and foremost what Dynasty is all about: recruiting. Now, we have already gone through essentially the blog post for the initial recruiting information, and most of that information really is the same. There's nothing quite new, but we again have that visual representation starting with our prospect list. This is going to break down quite a few different things. First off, starting on the left-hand side, targeting is something we had previously. Green, the actual target icon, and then nothing. So guys we're interested in, guys that are interested in us, and people that we're actually looking at. You also will notice that there is need popping up, which is nice to see. Just a quicker representation rather than going to the team needs screen, which is back into the game. We have the star rating of the player, the interest level of the player, and the stage they are in. If they're just open, talking to everyone, if they're in the top 8, top 5, top 3, or even verbally committed. It also gives the state, the pipeline, and there are blue chip pipelines as well, which you'll see indicated by the blue icon. That's going to be areas like South Florida and Atlanta. As for the actual recruits pages, we'll get to see some pretty similar information, most notably the progress bar underneath their information, where we're going to have the top 8, top 5, top 3, and when we fill that out, that should take us to our verbally committed stage, which if we see from just the overall standpoint of all the guys on our recruiting board, it also has that information with it saying verbally committed. Now, with having verbal commits, that also means you could have players decommit from your school, and it all comes down to player motivation or recruit motivation. And that even stays the same with your own players, which we'll talk about shortly. But the motivations are going to be key. You have to find where their interest and your best grades align. That is how you're going to recruit, as you're going to have to essentially make these pitches to help ensure that you can actually build towards that top 3, get the verbal commit, and then eventually get that commit. Now, one thing you will notice up in the top right where you have targets, hours, and scholarships, those hours are going to change. Like if we take a look back at that prospect screen, they have 750. That is UCF in comparison to Colorado. Now, what is interesting with that is the hours you have is not tied directly to your coaching abilities, but in fact tied to the prestige of your school. So Deion Sanders actually has less hours per week than honestly whoever the head coach is here for UCF. But you will be able to utilize those hours again every single week, done that way to represent just the team's abilities, the actual school's resources to do recruiting, to influence players to join you. So 600, and it's not necessarily 600 hours, but just 600 points, we'll call it. And you'll have to spend 5 points to search social media, 10 points to DM the player, 25 to contact friends and family, 50 to send the house. And while they are currently locked here in this screenshot, you do have soft sell and hard sell. You'll be able to use those to help try to sway the opinion that that prospect has with your school. But as touched on earlier, those motivations still stay constant throughout that player's term with your school, which you have up to 5 seasons, redshirt, then freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. There are no medical redshirts and no COVID years. We are gone with the 8-year seniors. And in pretty similar correlation to the deal breakers, which are new, again touched on in the previous video, if you do not meet your top prospects' dire needs for this player here in Mike McCargo, his biggest worry is playing time. He has to have a B- in that category. But with Clemson, he only has a C+. That means deal is done. He is not going to even consider your school. If those motivations still do not match your player as you go through the seasons, well, then you will find them at risk to transfer. You will still have the ability to try to pitch to your current players to keep them around, but some just might be too far gone. As we see the starting defensive tackle here for the Cincinnati Bearcats, 91 overall, his risk of transfer all the way up because, well, championship contender is not meeting his motivations. But getting back to recruiting new guys instead of trying to keep those around, though that's still a really big part of the game. For recruiting, when it comes to scheduling visits, there is an art form to that as well. As we see here with Keenan, there is not as much of a boost that could happen here if scheduled against USC as if we lose to USC. But with Sam scheduled against Ohio State, a win against them could do so much more for us than a loss could particularly hurt us. Additionally, as he is a quarterback, scheduling him as the same time as a potential receiver he could be throwing to does also provide a little bit of a boost. But ultimately, coming down to who we want to actually try to recruit, we will have to spend some of that same amount of quote-unquote hours as we had to do to actually do the recruiting, and I just realized that my screenshot shows the volume, so that's fun, a little behind the scenes for you. But you can also notice that for Penn State, they have over 1,100 quote-unquote hours. Again, I think they're more like points here of recruiting. Have to spend 10 to start to increase the scouting. And as you can see here, the attributes have a progression bar. You fill that up, you end up filling out all of their information. And when you get to that point, you know what their key attributes are going to be. On top of that, also their abilities, mentals, and there's even development traits as well. Now ping-ponging back over to transfer portals. Once you lose your guys, or when you're trying to bring guys in, which again can only happen at the end of a season. During the off season, there is no tampering. You're going to have another tab, essentially. Inside your recruiting, you had your recruiting board, your prospect list. Transfer portal is separate. Now you're going to have a much narrower window of time, so expect these guys to go quickly. But the overall scouting, recruiting works the exact same. And at the end of the season, after your guys leave, this screen might become really important for you to see where you had guys transfer out, where maybe you had some surprise guys leave. Because once again, you're going to have guys exiting your team a lot more frequent than in years prior, whether it's graduation, transferring for whatever their reasons are, declaring early, or entering the draft as a senior. So keep an eye on this board so that way you could head back to the transfer portal and fill out any remaining gaps you have, or maybe you're just running really young at a position group, so you decide maybe to bring in a more veteran player. Now again, touching on another topic we have already discussed, custom conferences are returning, and this screen looks very, very familiar to what we had in the years prior. Did a whole video on how we will be doing custom conferences, an entire realignment, and a relegation. You can check the card up in the top right corner for more information on that. But most importantly, we actually have the information on what rules we are able to decide here, and divisions being one of them. So here with the Sun Belt, you have the East, you have the West. You can turn that on or off, so you could either have division winner of the East, division winner of the West, and then have those two go head to head for the conference championship, or you can just turn it off and the top two teams battle it out. That is one of the settings that we can change here with conference rules. The championship game selection criteria, top teams by conference record, is what is pre-selected. You also can update where that game is held. As for the SEC, that is Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You can turn on or off a championship game. Like the Pac-12 as it currently stands, I don't really think you could have a championship game because there's only 2 teams. Additionally, you can also increase or decrease the number of conference games, and you can change the names of the divisions if you do choose to use them. Moving to some new information though, coaching carousel. It is back. You can move around. If you start as an OC, well, you can find your way moving up to head coach. Additionally, you will also have the ability as a head coach to have coaching carousel for your coordinators. Just as in years past, OCs, DCs, they might get fired, retire. Now they have the ability to move to the NFL, though typically that's going to be your head coaches. Not always the case, but for the most part. You will also be able to fire your coordinators and bring in new coordinators that better fit your needs. And that really comes down to these coaching skill trees, which there are 3 different categories, though looking at this screen, there's a lot more in depth than you can go. And this is more just of a overall map showing what your coaching tree is. You could get real down into all of these abilities and you can diversify what your skill tree looks like, not just sticking to motivator. You could go into recruiting, increasing your players' talent as well. There's a lot to go into. You will not, however, be able to unlock every single ability. So choosing wisely and picking good coordinators will greatly help you. Now, how do you upgrade your guy? Well, it's going back to coaching XP. And once you level up, then you'll be able to make your decision on what talent tree you want to dive further into. Now, one fun thing, though also confusing thing, but I'm glad it's in it, is the ability to create your own coach. Now, a lot of people are not happy with the fact that you cannot create prospects or really edit players because of that whole likeness issue. We have the ability to create our own coach, and if you really wanted, you could try to create a Nick Saban lookalike, even though EA doesn't quite have that likeness. So interesting note there. Another interesting note here is pipeline. It looks like you can go ahead and create your initial pipeline that your coach may have. Well, let's say that he played football at Georgia. You could have your pipeline be either Georgia, maybe even specifically Atlanta. But I do like that we do have the aggressiveness slider back in here. So offensively, defensively, how aggressive are you going to be? I like that that is in there. I wish Madden had that. And maybe it will be with Madden 25. And depending on how successful you are in Season 1, you could be the first coach to win the College Football Playoff 12-team format. However, the ability to change this format is not in the game. It is strictly just going to be the 12 teams, no expansion, no shrinking. But overall, I think that is a really nice first look into everything we're gonna have here. If you have not watched the deep dive video, go check that out, and definitely go check out the blog post. There is so much information in there, but so much that wouldn't really be able to cover it in this video. It is a long one, but a lot of little details that we weren't really going to be able to see in just looking at the screenshots. But we talked so much about the blog, wanted to get some visuals on there, so let me know what your guys' opinion are. Are you excited? Is it a little bit more modernized than what we had, but very similar to NCAA 12-13, which some people are huge fans of in terms of the recruiting? A lot more detailed, less streamlined than NCAA 14, and you're gonna have to spend a lot more time, not just dump a bunch of points in a guy and hope that they end up eventually committing to your team. Because now not only do you have to worry about getting that initial commitment, keeping that commitment, signing them, and once they're on your team, they still might try to leave. So you've got to make sure you are coming ready to play every single week. Because if those motivations start to drop, so will not only your commitments, but so will the players on your roster. So a whole lot added here to College Football 25. Extremely excited as we are just a few weeks away. Make sure you're staying tuned to the community tab as well as information drop there. Some hints as well as towards who is not and who is going to be our first Dynasty team. So interact over there and we will see you guys next time. As if you didn't watch today's earlier video, we're still back to those 5 days a week Madden episodes. Again, when EA Sports College Football 25 comes out, we will be sticking to college football for probably a few weeks, then going back to Madden maybe when the new one comes out. We'll play that a little bit by ear, so make sure you stick around, hit that bell icon on the bottom right, or scroll down, hit the sub button down below, and definitely tap that bell icon so you are notified. We'll talk a little bit more about the game as more information comes out. But for now, we are back to playing games, so we'll see you over there as well.